Morning, everybody. Yeah, so I just would like to start by having everyone take a deep breath, because I sure need it. And we can all use the opportunity to come back to ourselves. In those rushed moments of life, we forget who we are. That we're spiritual beings here on earth. Allowing communication of spirit in whatever form that may take. Thank you, God, for this opportunity to be with everyone, to be together for learning and growing and finding our own inner GPS. Amen. Okay, so I think I will just start with my talk. I have a couple of songs potentially planned, something, for everybody to sing along and, in your own homes. But maybe we'll do that after the talk. Okay, so I will just arrange my screen and so you all got the email. My talk title is To Suffer or Not to Suffer? That is the question. And Neil has already told me that he chooses not to suffer, so he can hang up now. Okay, he declined. So everybody knows this soliloquy, to be, or at least the first line, to be or not to be. And my question is, why is that the question? So we're all familiar with that first line, as ubiquitous as it is, but I'd like to read a few more lines of Hamlet's soliloquy for those who are not as familiar with the rest. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub, for in that sleep of death what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil. So if we can unmute the microphones for a moment, I'd like to invite someone who would care to chime in about what he's really talking about. Maybe there's some Shakespeare fans out there. Anybody who wants to take a stab at it? Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, sorry. Rosie thinks that you're here because I said good morning.
Rosie, I have something to say then.
That's right. I knew that the to be or not to be was about suicide, about contemplating, do I want to be alive or not be alive, because the character was suffering so much.
Yeah, exactly. It's about suicide, and on the other side of it, it's about the fear of death. He's trapped because he's afraid of what's going to happen after he dies. So, okay, thank you, Mary, and we can mute everybody again. I'll invite discussion later on. Thanks. So yeah, it's about escape from suffering. And his only way of escape from suffering is that he can think of is through suicide. And so he's trapped in this never-ending cycle of suffer. So to suffer or not to suffer is the real question. And is death really the only way to escape? Or better to ask, is escape really the only option? I believe most people today feel that escape, which includes addictions and distractions up to and including suicide, are their only options, or they wouldn't do them. And that's a very sad state of affairs. So Shakespeare goes on to describe many sources of suffering: the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, which I looked up, and it means insolent or insulting language, the pangs of despised love, and on and on. So many outward sources of suffering, but it's the inward experience that makes it so. And I'm someone who loves to drill down into the root to really understand it, because I believe that all healing occurs at the source. So to that end, I'd like to talk about the different types of suffering for the different causes and different means of escape. There's physical pain, something we can all relate to on some level, especially chronic or severe pain. For the definition of to suffer is to endure or put up with stress. There's emotional pain, anxiety, depression, insecurity, and much more. The pain of being wronged or victimized, which can lead to perseveration of painful memories, feeling anger and lack of forgiveness. The pain of awareness, which is the pain that occurs when an inner truth is revealed or when a deeply held belief is challenged. And then there's the pain of caring. And what do I mean by the pain of caring? There are people in this world that care so deeply for others. The lovers, the dreamers, the sensitives. Some people care for their own inner circle, which can contain enough pain to keep them busy. Some care for a group that they associate with. Some care for all people. And some people care for all of life, the whole earth. And the more you care, the more there is in that list to suffer for, to feel the woes, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. And when we talk about suffering, we mainly talk about ending it, like Shakespeare. If we're in physical pain, we go to the doctor and take prescriptions. Sometimes we get addicted. If we're in emotional pain, some of us go to the psychologist or take prescriptions to dull it. If we're being persecuted, we might fight or run away. And if we suffer for the condition of the world, we march, campaign, write letters, vote, post on Facebook, sign petitions, and sometimes argue with others and try to change the world out there. The one type of pain I mentioned stands apart from the rest is the pain of awareness, but I'll come back to that. So Buddhism is a philosophy centrally concerned with ending suffering, as its entire practice is centered around how not to suffer. Adherents are encouraged to explore what suffering is, what they call desires and aversions. They say that to avoid suffering, one must detach from desires and aversions. So the basis of Buddhism is a doctrine known as the Four Noble Truths. The first truth is that suffering, pain, and misery exist in life. The second truth is that suffering is caused by selfish craving and personal desire. The third truth is that this selfish craving can be overcome. And the fourth truth is that the way to overcome this misery is through the Eightfold Path. There are 8 attitudes or paths you must follow to find freedom from suffering, which are symbolized by the 8-spoked wheel. These are the right or correct things to do in your life. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And this is the way to reach nirvana, according to Buddhism. So it seeks enlightenment through the cessation of all suffering. Christianity, by contrast, exalts suffering. And honestly, when I started researching for this talk, I didn't set out to compare and contrast Buddhism and Christianity. I was just trying to look at what various faith traditions had to say about it, but I was struck by the differences in how they address it. Here's just 2 verses from the Bible on the topic. But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled. Peter 3:14. And since therefore Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves with the same way of thinking, for whoever has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. Peter 4:1. The Bible addresses suffering in literally the opposite way from Buddhism. It says not to avoid suffering, but our glory and salvation is to be achieved through suffering. In some of the more extreme interpretations, this even leads to self-inflicted suffering, such as self-flagellation, as a way to endure some measure of the suffering of Christ. This is something that's much emphasized in traditional Christianity. So to them, to suffer in this life is to be closer to God, to be purified and blessed by God.
Together this morning, and as we sing our final song, would you just
could we mute all microphones, Neil? I think somebody's coming through.
Commitment, and would you just look up to heaven and say, Lord, I trust you.
Thank you. So for the origins of suffering, also in a biblical sense, some people look to the story of Adam and Eve. We all know what happens. Eve disobeys God and, tempted by the serpent, takes one bite of a beautiful red apple, and poof, they and all of humanity suffer the pain of it being from then on. And it seems like a pretty harsh punishment for all of humanity to have to suffer forever for one small mistake, doesn't it? So who's right about suffering? Shakespeare with his vicious cycle of fear and pain, Buddhism with its goals of eradicating suffering and the march to enlightenment, or Christianity by willingly enduring and even taking on suffering to the glory of God? Personally, I can see truths in all of these statements. For all that suffering causes misery, it also leads us individually toward healing and growth, toward evolution and greater levels of knowledge and achievement. Back to the Adam and Eve story, fraught with subterfuge, harsh judgment, lack of compassion, and draconian punishment, so far afield from the God of my perception that I never accepted it. So when I read the radically new interpretation of this age-old story from Rabbi Harold Kushner in the book, How Good Do We Have to Be?, it opened my eyes as I understood the real power in Eve's action. He rebrands the story not as a failure to obey God. How could they if they didn't even know the difference between right and wrong in their innocent state? Instead, he says that Eve bravely led the way into the unknown, that by eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, she helped humanity evolve and grow into consciousness and self-awareness, separating us from the animal kingdom. It is a story that reflects what actually happened in history as our hominid ancestors tamed fire, gained better weapons, ate more meat, grew their brains, and slowly grew over millions of years to ever greater states of awareness. I believe if the universe is concerned with one thing, it is evolution. Physical evolution, yes, but mostly evolution of consciousness. Ever since human consciousness evolved, relief from suffering has driven much of our innovation and progress. Religion, medicine, education, all the greatest intellectual accomplishments of humankind have at their core a fight to raise our human condition, overcome fear, increase our wealth and health, and accumulate knowledge as a way out of all manner of suffering. So to the question about who's right, you won't find me drawing a conclusion. I think the world is big enough to encompass all philosophies and beliefs, and that the answer lies with each individual to put their suffering into a greater context and pursue the messages in it for what good it has to offer, because I believe we're here to learn and to evolve, and that's all. Suffering motivates us. Pain gets us not only to the doctor, chiropractor, or physical therapist, it gets us on our knees, driving us to deeper levels of spiritual seeking. In the times of physical suffering in my life, I experienced sensations of spiritual love that I've never felt before or since. I was blessed by a stranger in public. I experienced people's generosity and caring, and I experienced God through them. I had many, many angels. None of this would have happened if I'd maintained perfect health. When life is good, let's face it, there's not much driving us. So in this way, I can see the truth in the biblical way of addressing suffering. If, like Hamlet, you're locked in a never-ending cycle of fear and pain, then escape might look pretty good. Except that I don't think it's actually possible to escape from suffering by running away from it. And in this way, I agree with the Buddhists, that we actually cause our own suffering, that somehow, and this is where a great mystery lies that I cannot claim any actualized level of understanding, that we've come to this life having chosen our challenges, understanding in the spirit realm exactly what we need to grow. In human form, I believe we also have the power to affect our experiences as the universe returns our expectations to us, but that's a whole other talk. We operate on a subconscious level a majority of the time, even those of us who are trying mightily to wake up. And here's where the pain of awareness comes in that I mentioned at the beginning. If we're to heal emotional and energetic pain from the inside out, we must strive to uncover the source. And when the light of non-judgmental awareness shines on that belief, it can dissipate like fog in the sunshine. But digging to find the pain is rather against human nature, whose entire history and programming is to avoid or escape from suffering. So maybe the Buddhists provide one path to face and endure and see the lessons to be learned in suffering from an opposite but no less valid direction than Christianity. Just to be clear, I don't believe in exalting suffering or self-punishment or in helping other people to learn their lessons by increasing their suffering, or even to say that other people must suffer, so I'll just stand back and let them learn their lessons. That is not my point. It's for us to examine our own lessons and also to do our best to help others. This is an inward journey, an inexorable search for the truth through which one might encounter pain. And the truth of life isn't one thing. You know, maybe ultimately it is, but for us in everyday life, we search and cast about for truth, sometimes elusively. I feel often like a fisher in the universe, casting my net into the void and coming up mostly empty, sometimes catching little gems and occasionally landing a huge prize, a prize of healing or understanding, so great that it moves and shakes me to the core. Something that can change how you feel. And what drives us to that is suffering initially, a desire to overcome extreme fear and anxiety can put you on a path of learning and growth that eventually can become habit. What I think I understand about suffering is that it's inevitable, but the consciousness with which we approach it and the effort we put into moving toward it instead of away defines our experience. That we don't have control over what happens to us, but we have control over how we respond. The Buddhists call that 2 arrows. I heard Thich Nhat Hanh talk about this in person at an event that I attended in LA many years ago. He said that the first arrow is something that happens to us, and the second arrow is what we do to ourselves, our reaction. We're wronged, and then we hold that memory for a lifetime, recalling its pain over and over again. Some people very dear to me are locked in that struggle. Flooding the body with the emotional and chemical signatures of pain, grief, anger, helplessness, etc., are part of what magnifies the suffering. The second arrow, the third, fourth, 100th, 1000th. This carves indelibly into the terrain of our neural pathway, simply out of habit. To heal the root, people need tools. Medicine, education, religion, and awareness, all tools at their disposal to heal the suffering for the ultimate goal of releasing the self-caused pain, for the priceless lessons we learn, and learning from the outward sources of pain that we feel helpless to resolve. So Harold Kushner imagines a world in which Eve disobeyed God. In which Eve obeyed God and did not eat the apple. So in this imagined version of a different outcome, he writes, "So the woman saw that the tree was good to eat and a delight to the eye, and the serpent said to her, 'Eat of it, for when you eat of it, you will be as wise as God.' But the woman said, 'No, God has commanded us not to eat of it, and I will not disobey God.' And God called to the man and woman and said to them, 'Because you have hearkened to my word and not disobeyed my command, I shall reward you greatly.' To the man he said, 'You will never have to work again. Spend all your days in idle contentment and with food growing all around you.' To the woman he said, 'You will bear children without pain, and you will raise them without pain. They will need nothing from you. Children will not cry when their parents die, and parents will not cry when their children die.' To both of them he said, 'For the rest of your lives, you will have full bellies and contented smiles. You will never cry and will never laugh. You will never long for something you don't have, and you will never receive something you always wanted. And the man and the woman grew old together in the garden, eating daily from the tree of life and having many children. And the grass grew high around the tree of knowledge of good and evil until it disappeared from view, for there was no one to tend it. And this story moves me. It paints a different picture, doesn't it? It's a picture of life with many shades and colors being necessary components of our existence. The struggle and suffering of life is like our driver, our bringer of love, hope, and gratitude. Who can be really grateful for something they've always possessed? The drive and struggle of suffering of life can be viewed as the only thing that makes our world meaningful and gives us something and someone to fight for. So don't get me wrong, I'm not glorifying suffering, and I'm not going to run out after this to begin self-flagellation. I do hope to be able to ease some of the suffering of the people that I care about and of the whole world. The primary thing I hope you can take away from this talk is to empower yourself to look within for any sources of suffering you have built for yourself. And in any physical or outer sources of suffering, for you to give yourself credit for doing the best you can. To never give up, to know with your whole heart that everything we experience in this life is for our ultimate good. Maybe it sounds trite, but I truly believe that as I look for my own experiences. Our earthly task is always to lift ourselves up above our circumstances, and humans being what we are, we need a driver, a motivation. No one likes to suffer. I don't. And I don't like to see others suffer either. I can get philosophical about suffering, but I'm too practical minded to just leave it there. We don't get a choice about what happens to us. We only get to choose how we react on multiple levels. To start, we can avoid the second arrow, the pain we cause ourselves. Then we can take appropriate action to help lead us closer to a resolution, going through the emotions, not away from them, so we can achieve a sense of empowerment. And then we can accept what's happening as something that is for our higher good, something that brings us closer to God and our spiritual upliftment. To suffer or not to suffer, that is a complex question, one that may well be rooted in our purpose for existing, one that gives life meaning and power and the opportunity to use our gift of consciousness to individually and collectively evolve. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bless you, everybody.
Would you like to kind of segue into a brief meditation on this whole suffering concept?
Certainly, yes. So in order to do that, I have a meditative song that I'd like to share with everybody. I know there's a way that I can share my screen so you can see the lyrics. One moment. So we will just sing the first two choruses, and then I'll repeat Such a Holy Place where we're to end, because the song continues. We'll sing that together individually on mute, and because I know that doesn't sound good when everybody's not lined up on this virtual stuff, and then we can just go straight into meditation from there.
We don't see the music.
I haven't actually shared it yet.
Oh,
I'm trying
okay.
to get it enlarged so everybody can see it. 1 second. And I need a new computer. This is slow.
Hey, Cindy, I don't have to do anything in the administrative aspect to allow her to share her screen, do I?
I can share it from my end.
Okay, good. All right.
And actually, I can just delete everything that's not being sung, so I'll just do that. Okay, Sorry, folks, one moment. Bigger. Okay, here we go. Host disabled attendee screen sharing. Can the host enable attendee screen sharing?
That's why I asked Cindy,
I
or
think you can make her a speaker, can't you?
where is that in the,
You can have her share the screen, or you can make her a co-host. Either one will.
all right, where?
Okay, you know what? I'm gonna, now my cursor isn't working, so I'm just gonna sing it for you, okay? And if you recognize the song, you can feel free to jump in.
Make sure everybody's taking a nice deep breath before you begin singing, please.
Yes, let's come back to ourselves. Take a breath. And as I sing this song, and take the words into your heart, to hold our suffering tenderly and compassionately and the suffering of others. Because we are all sacred and we're here for a sacred purpose. So the song is Sacred Love by Daniel Nahmad. You are sacred love, sacred love is all that you are. You are sacred love, sacred love is all that you are. Show the way, God, show the way. I want to live in such a state of grace. Lead the way, God, lead the way. I want to live in such a holy place. Such a holy place. You are blessed peace, blessed peace is all that you are. You are blessed peace, God, blessed peace is all that you are. Show the way, God, show the way. I want to live in such a state of grace. Lead the way, God, lead the way. I want to live in such a holy place. Such a holy place. You are deepest joy. Deepest joy is all that you are. You are deepest joy, God. Deepest joy is all that you are. Deepest joy is all that you are. All that you are.